Hi, good morning. Welcome to another chapter of our lecture in genetics, Bio 122 class. So this time we'll talk about sex determination and sex chromosomes. So here, if you recall in our previous lectures, we talk about um, the 46 chromosomes in humans, and there's one very special pair, homologous pair in the 46, which we call as sex chromosomes. And this chromosome is unique because they actually determine the sex of living organisms. And for this chapter, we will talk about some important concepts about how X and Y chromosomes were linked to determining sex, and how did geneticists realize that it's actually the X and Y chromosome, that homologous pair determines sex. And we will also talk about why the Y chromosomes and how they determine the maleness in humans. And we also talk about why the ratio of male to female in humans is not always equal to 1 or 50-50 or 1:1 ratio. Even if you have a sperm and egg, or the equal distribution of X and Y in sperms, they still do not give us a ratio of 1:1. And then we'll also talk about dosage compensation, how uh, two X chromosomes in females do not lead to overexpression of the genes linked to that X chromosome. And then the ratio of X chromosomes to sets of autosomes also determine sex. And finally, we talk about how temperature variation also controls sex determination in reptiles. Okay. If you recall in your previous biology classes, probably in your high school or in your senior high school, there's actually a wide range of reproductive modes in our biosphere. Some organisms are entirely asexual, meaning they reproduce by asexual means that does not require fertilization of sex cells, like the egg cell, and fertilized by a sperm cell. But other living organisms also require sexual reproduction, meaning there's short periods of sexual reproduction and prolonged periods of uh, sexual reproduction. And for some, like us and other mammals, we reproduce by sexual reproduction, meaning the only natural mechanism for producing new members of species is by fertilizing an egg cell from a sperm cell. And we also talk about the advantages and disadvantages of asexual reproduction, alternating modes of sexual and asexual, as well as asexual reproduction. So, for example, to highlight again, the importance of sexual reproduction is it gives phenotypic and genotypic variability, which enhances the survival of that organism. And this is brought about many processes in from fertilization to from meiosis, the gametogenesis, and then even during prophase one, metaphase one in meiosis, they result into variability as brought about by segregation, recombination. You remember, you remember synapse, and then of course independent assortment during gametogenesis, or during the production of sperms and egg cells. And this creates again variability, diversity in different sex cells, which will later then result into phenotypic variability. Uh, Successful fertilization also depends on sexual differentiation, meaning sexual reproduction is brought about by differences in sex. We call this as for example, in humans, we call this as phenotypic dimorphism. What do we mean by phenotypic dimorphism? Dimorphism, di means two, morph means form. So meaning two forms. Where does that two forms come from? From the phenotype. So for example, us in humans, males and females have different forms, and these forms for male allow them to 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 survive and to become adapted to the environment, as well as females. Their form allows them to fit and survive in the environment. And this differentiation, sexual differentiation, is not only limited to reproductive organs, but also to other anatomical and morphological structures in living organisms. But for this lecture, we'll focus more on the reproductive organs. We know that males have different reproductive organs to that of the females, and this differentiation in their reproductive organs allow them to sexually reproduce. Because if they do not, if they have similar reproductive organs, it would be difficult, right? So, for example, in eukaryotic organisms, we exhibit phenotypic dimorphisms, as I've mentioned earlier. Males differ in in terms of their sexual organ to that of females. Aside from this phenotypic differentiation or phenotypic dimorphism, our cells also are, have two forms. We call it heteromorphic, meaning we have the similar or two forms of sex chromosomes in mammals. You have an X chromosome and a Y chromosomes. And this actually characterizes one sex or the other in wide range of species, not only in humans, but in some other living organisms. And genes, rather than the sex chromosomes, are actually the basis for sex determination. So meaning, it's not just actually the X and the Y, but it's actually the genes within those X and Y chromosomes that determines sex. Okay? So here, we will now talk about when and how they determine that it's actually the genes in the X and Y chromosomes are postulated to have an important role in determining sex, and it was in the early 20th century. So nuclear structure in sperm of insect discovered in 1891, they called it X body, and female somatic cells in butterfly have 14 chromosomes, including two X chromosomes, while the male somatic cells have 13 chromosomes with one X chromosome. Okay? So fertilization by an X-bearing sperm that would result into a female offspring, while fertilization by an X-deficient sperm, it will result into a male offspring. So what does that mean? So for example, if you have an egg here that has 14 chromosomes because it comes from a mother, so 14, the egg cell will divide, undergo gametogenesis. It will result to an egg with 7 chromosomes. Okay? Sperm, on the other hand, will have 13 chromosomes. When it undergoes gametodivision, meiosis, for example, your primary spermatocyte, will result into one sperm cell with 7 chromosomes, while the other sperm cell will have 6 chromosomes. So depending which sperm cell will fertilize the egg, that would determine the sex. How? If, for example, this sperm with an X bearing sperm will fertilize this, it would result into an offspring with 14 chromosome. And that 14 chromosome would be a female butterfly. But if this sperm will fertilize this egg, it would result in a zygote with 13 chromosomes. And that 13 chromosome would be a male because it lacks an X chromosome. So here the butterflies Protinor and Leguus, these insects, the males produce unlike gametes. We call them heterogametic sex. Like for example, if you have X and Y, we call them heterogametic sex because the chromosomes are different. When we say homogametic sex, all have X chromosomes. Like for females, they have X and X. In some organisms, females produce unlike gametes, but we'll not talk about them. We'll focus more on these group of animals, the insects and humans per se, because it's more we're more related. So here, male gametes are heterogametic because we have either an X or a Y chromosome. So here is an example. So for an XX female, like for one species, no? So it's 12 autosomes plus 2 X's. So that's 6 autosomes plus X. So how many chromosomes are that? That's 7 chromosomes. While here, you have a male, 12 autosomes and 1 X chromosome. So when it undergoes meiosis, one sperm cell will have 6 autosomes without an X chromosome, while one sperm cell will have 6 autosomes and an X chromosome. So this will have 7 chromosomes. So if this sperm cell fertilizes this egg cell, then it would be male because it's 12 autosomes plus an X chromosome. While if this sperm fertilizes this egg, it will have 12 autosomes and 2 X chromosomes, total to 14. So this was the example I gave earlier. Here, on the other hand, in this example, uh, if so this is homogametic because it's just excess. So what determines the maleness or the femaleness of the living organism is the presence or the absence of the X chromosome. If the X chromosome is absent, then the living this insect for that matter will be male. But if the X chromosome is present, then that living organism is a female. Here in another example, this is heterogametic, meaning you have an X and a Y chromosome. So here, females, for example, you have 12 autosomes and then 2 X chromosomes, while males have 12 autosomes but a heterogametic chromosomes. You have an X and a Y. So similar to humans, it depends. No, you have a sperm that is a Y sperm and a sperm that is an egg sperm. If the Y sperm fertilizes the egg, it will be a male. If the X sperm fertilizes the egg, it will be a female. Still, 1:1 sex ratio, theoretically, same with this one, 1:1 sex ratio. So in other living organisms, they do not actually use X and Y. They use ZZ and ZW notation. So this is used when female is heterogametic. It's not just the male for humans, for example, it's the male that is heterogametic while females are homogametic. But if it's the female that is heterogametic, ZW will be for female and ZZ is for male, and this is shown in species of chickens. Okay, let's continue. So here, when did they determine, for example, in humans, that it is actually the Y chromosome that determines the maleness? Unlike in the, for example, in the butterfly, the Proteinor species, it's actually the absence of the X chromosomes that determines the maleness. But for in humans, how did they determine that it's actually the Y chromosome? So in the human karyotype, it actually reveals that one pair of chromosome differs. There's sex differentiation in one pair of our chromosomes. So we know this already, that of the 23 pairs of chromosome, one pair is actually varied in configuration. In females, you have 2 X chromosomes, while in males, it's 1 X and Y chromosomes. So, and based from various genetic disorders they've learned. So for example, let's talk about Klinefelter syndrome. So what's Klinefelter syndrome? It's a genetic disorder where the person exhibits the phenotype with long arms and legs, and they also have large hands and feet, and their testes are rudimentary, meaning very basic, that it fails to produce sperm. And they have also slight breast enlargement, and hips are often round. So here, this description seems to fit that of a female in terms of morphology. And intelligence also is below normal range. How did that happen? In terms of their karyotype, you've learned this also in our laboratory session, that a person suffering from Klinefelter syndrome, they have 47 chromosomes with XXY karyotype. And this happened because there's a non-disjunction that happens. Oh, there's a non-disjunction. That's why there's an extra X chromosomes in the living organism. Here, for another genetic disorder, Turner syndrome. So Turner syndrome, they have female external genitalia and an internal ducts, but ovaries are rudimentary. And they have short stature, skin flaps on back of the neck, flat underdeveloped breasts, broad and shield-like chest. So this describes quietly of male characteristics. And they also have normal intelligence. So here, both Klinefelter and Turner syndrome actually due to non-disjunction during meiosis. So here, this is their karyotype. So this is 47. You have two X's and Y chromosome. Well, this one is for your Turner syndrome. Sorry, uh, one with one X chromosome. So what happens is that during gametogenesis, for example, here instead of having a sperm, for example, a sperm having a Y uh, chromosome and the next chromosome, during gametogenesis, there's one sperm that has an XY chromosome, while there's one sperm with no sex chromosome. So this will have 24 chromosomes, while this one will have 22. So if this sperm fertilizes a normal egg, it will have XXY. While if this sperm fertilizes this egg, it will have 45X karyotype. There's also another instance where we have what we call as the 47 triplo X. Here, there's three X chromosomes along with a normal set of autosomes. So here, it's the egg cell that underwent non-disjunction. So an egg cell will have an XX, and it's fertilized by an egg which also has an X chromosome. Okay, that's why it's 47 triple X. And this actually have our women are perfectly normal and they're also unaware of the condition. And one symptom or one phenotypic expression is that they have underdeveloped secondary sex characteristics. Some are sterile, and there's also mental retardation. And there's also disorders that have tetra X, meaning four X's, and then penta X karyotypes have also been reported. Penta meaning five X's. Here, another unique condition with the presence of additional Y chromosome, and it's the only deviation from diploidy. It's consistently sharing characteristics found so far. Males are over 6 feet tall with subnormal intelligence. So here, they said that it's actually the Y chromosome that houses the genetic information in terms of maleness. A gene provides signal, and early embryonic development, the embryo actually is hermaphroditic, meaning the in the early embryonic development, when the zygote undergoes growth and development, blastocyst, amomogrosia, it divides into several cells. The embryo actually is hermaphrodite, meaning it has a capability, it does not have any sex. It has a capability of developing male or female. That's why we call it bipotential gonads, meaning the gonadal ridges, so there's a group of tissues in the embryo, can either form either an ovary or a testes. So what turns on or turns off the the cellular processes in those tissues to determine whether it will be developed into an ovary or a testes. So, what mechanism, what process? So here, scientists, geneticists put forwarded several explanations to why. And here, uh, now we know that if a cell of a ridge, the gonadal ridge, has X and Y constitution, the medulla of the ridge, the outer layer of the ridge, develops into a testes. And they also saw that if the cells in the ridge, in the gonadal ridge, sorry, has no Y chromosome, the cortex will develop into an ovarian tissue. So it will form into the Mullerian ducts will form into oviducts, uterus, cervix, and portions of the vagina. So here we see that it's the presence or the absence of the Y chromosome signals whether the gonadal ridge will form into a testes or it will form into ovarian tissue. So here we try to compare. The Y chromosome has at least 75 genes and the X chromosomes has 900 to 1400 genes. We also during the Human Genome Project, where geneticists tried to map all the genes in the 46 chromosomes of living organisms, they were able to identify different sections of the X chromosome. For example, here you have the PAR, SRY, euchromatin, centromere, of course, the euchromatin still, heterochromatin, and the PAR. So what is PAR? PAR is the pseudo-autosomal region. So it's actually present on both ends of the Y chromosome, and this is actually homologous to the region of the X chromosome. So for example, a male will have an X and Y chromosome, right? So the PAR, the region or the pseudo-autosomal region will be homologous. So even if the X and Y are not of the same structure, they're not of the same length. We know that X is longer and Y is smaller. They share certain regions that are homologous. And this is also the reason why this portion of the sex chromosomes can undergo synapse and form recombinant DNA or your recombination. So here, during prophase 1 to metaphase 1, it will undergo synapse or crossing over, and then they will exchange genetic material for the same allele. So pairing region is critical for the segregation of the X and Y chromosomes during male gametogenesis. So this PAR is actually important so that the X and Y will pair up during prophase until metaphase, and then when once they separate during anaphase. So we also have a region we call MSY, the male specific region of the Y chromosome. So this is actually equally divided between the euchromatic or the functional genes and the heterochromatic regions lacking genes. So we've learned this in our previous chapter that a certain chromosome can have euchromatic, meaning these are the parts of our chromosome that is translated to develop certain phenotypic expressions. And when we say heterochromatic, this refers to the region in our chromosome that does not have any genes and they are not translated. And we also have what we call as SRY, or the sex determining region of the Y chromosome. So it's a critical region that controls sexual development, and it's located adjacent to PAR of short arm on Y chromosome. So here, this is the the portion showing the Y chromosome. So you have your PAR, the SRY, sex determining region of the Y, euchromatin. So this carries the 70 plus genes carried in the Y chromosome, and then a large portion of non-coding or non non-expressed portion of the chromatin, and then PAR. Okay. So SRY gene encodes protein TDF. So what is TDF? This is testis determining factor. So this SRY gene, this is present in all mammals, and this triggers the testis formation. If you remember in our previous in the last few slides, we talk about how the Y chromosome signals the gonadal ridges to develop into a testis. So it's actually the genes uh, that encodes the protein we call testis determining factor that triggers that switch from gonadal ridge into testis. And then there's also deviation from the normal sex determination. So for example, if males with two X chromosomes and no Y, and females with one X chromosome and one Y chromosome are missing the SRY gene. So here, they had an experiment on mice, transgenic mice research. They produced, it's produced from fertilized eggs injected with foreign DNA, and the mouse DNA with SRY injected into XX mice eggs, it developed offspring being male. So even if the eggs are XX, because of the SRY, what is SRY? The sex determining region of the Y. So the SRY will develop into TDF, will develop proteins we call TDF. And this TDF triggers the development of the testes. So even if the mice have XX chromosome, it develop into the males because it's believed that the TDF, being a transcription factor, behaves like a switch controlling the genes involved in sexual differentiation in living organisms. Okay, now we've learned that it's actually the Y, the gene, the SRY gene present in the Y chromosome that determines, that switches on the maleness or the femaleness of the living organism. And we've learned also in our previous lecture that uh, uh, there's 1-to-1 ratio. There's a 50-50 chance ratio of having males and females in the zygote. But based on experimental studies, they saw that it's not actually an exact 1.0 ratio. So, and why is that? Before we go to that, how did they determine that the male ratio, the male to female ratio is not 1:1 across the global population? So let's define some key terms first. We have what we call a sex ratio. So this is the proportion between male to female offsprings. And then the PSR, primary sex ratio. It reflects the proportion of male to females conceived in a population. So meaning the zygote, is the zygote male or female, because that's conceived. And then secondary sex ratio, it's the proportion of each sex being born. So PSR is very difficult to determine because it's the sex of the zygote. While secondary sex ratio, it's easy because you can just look at the census data and then you can determine the secondary sex ratio. But we have to remember that the secondary sex ratio is not an accurate representation of the sex ratio, because there are a lot of instances of embryonic failure when the embryo does not fully develop and are being miscarriaged, and that would not reflect an uh accurate ratio for males and females. So here, several studies looking at secondary and even primary sex ratio. They look at zygotes, no, and then even miscarriage zygotes. They look at the ratio between X and Y, and they saw that there are more males born than females, and this question uh piqued the curiosity of many geneticists, and they tried to explain why the ratio is not actually 1:1. And in some, for example, in one study they saw that may in two or three studies, I can't remember it exactly, they saw that more males are being born than females, and they offered an explanation and for that. And they said that due to segregation, males produce equal numbers of X and Y bearing sperm. And each type of sperm has an equivalent viability and motility. And the egg surface is receptive to both X and Y bearing sperm. So why then do we have males born more than females? If this assumptions are made, if we say that during uh, during male gametogenesis, spermatogenesis, there's an equal proportion of X and Y sperms. And we also assume that each sperm has an equal viability and motility to fertilize an egg. And we also assume that the surface of the egg can actually receive X and Y equally. It's both receptive to X and Y. So why then do we have more males born than females? So here, this question is still being under investigation by many geneticists because many recent findings contradict and convince earlier studies. So they still have no explanation why the ratio is not 1:1, even if we believe that it is theoretically 1:1. Okay, now let's go to the last part of this lecture. We talk about dosage compensation. So dosage compensation prevents excessive expression of X-linked genes in humans and in other mammals. So what does this mean? What does dosage compensation tell us? So if you remember, a female has two X chromosomes, right? While a male has an XY chromosome. So if you look at this heterogametic uh, sexual differentiation in humans, we would say that females would have more genetic products that was brought about by the X chromosome. Because for here, females have two X chromosomes. So for example, the genetic products, the proteins brought about by the genes in the X chromosome would be more in females because they have two X chromosomes. While for males, they only have one X chromosome, and therefore it has lesser genetic products brought about by the X chromosomes. So that would differentiate males and females. If females will have more of this genetic products while males have lesser of this. That is in theory. But later, geneticists were able to see uh, cellular process that controls actually. Because if this is the case, if females have more genetic products brought about by the X chromosome, it would result into uh, a mutation or a genetic problem with females because they have overly expressed the X chromosome. So there must be a mechanism to control the overexpression of the X chromosome. And they call this as dosage compensation. So dosage compensation balances the dose of X chromosome gene expression in males and females. So what is the mechanism for this? So there were two geneticists who was able to discover they call it sex chromatin body, or they call it bar bodies. Bar bodies are actually inactive forms of the X chromosomes, and they are highly condensed, and they lie sorry, they lie against the nuclear envelope during the interphase phase of the cell. And aside from one of the two X chromosomes, or they arise from one of the two X chromosomes, and they provide a possible mechanism for dosage compensation. So what do you mean by that? So here, di ba, you recall, a female has two X chromosomes, while a male has only one, and it has a heterogametic chromosome we call Y. So during interphase, geneticists saw that one of, sorry, one of these egg cell, sorry, let's go back to the pointer, the pen function. One actually of the egg cell becomes a bar body. This one, the one shown in this figure. What is that bar body? One X chromosome will not unwind, will not become, it's a chromatin, it will not become a chromatin. It will not become a chromosome, and it will not be expressed. That's why they call it an inactive X chromosome. And it's actually found in the nuclear envelope. So here, this is from a female chick cell, squamous epithelial cells. So here, there's a bar body, while in males, chick cell, there's no bar bodies. So they hypothesize that this actually is an inactive form of the X. And that would explain, it would give us the mechanism for dosage compensation. That is why females will not have an overly expressed X chromosome because one X chromosome is actually inactive. And we call it bar body or bar bodies. And they saw this also in those disorders we mentioned earlier. Like for example, since Turner syndrome has only it has 45X, their karyotype is 45X. So they only have one X chromosome and they saw no bar bodies in Turner syndrome. But in Klinefelter syndrome, they have two X's. So they saw one bar body. So this becomes, one of the X chromosome will become inactive. While for uh, triple X genetic disorder, there will be two bar bodies so that only one will be expressed. And the formula or what they propose is that the number of bar body is equals n minus 1 rule. So n here refers to the number of X chromosomes. So if here it's only 1, so 1 minus 1, that's 0. And then here, Klinefelter syndrome, 2 minus 1, so that's 1 bar body. And then for triple X, you have 47 triple X, so that's 3 minus 1, then you will have 2 bar bodies. And this is the artist depiction of that. So for example, males, sorry, since males only have one X chromosome, so there's no bar body. But for those with Turner syndrome, they have 45X, so they also have no bar bodies. For females, you have two X's, so you have one bar body in the nuclear envelope. While for 47 Klinefelter, you have two X and Y, one Y, so you have one bar body. For those triple X, uh, and then here, 48XXY, two bar bodies, and then 48 tetra X, and 49 tetra X, and with the Y chromosome, they have three bar bodies. So here, if one of the two X chromosomes is inactivated, why then is the Turner syndrome not entirely normal? Why are females with triple or tetra X's not normal? And why does an extra X in Klinefelter syndrome result in a special kind of uh, characteristic phenotype? The possible explanation for these questions are the inactivation does not take place during the early stages of the gonadal tissue development, and these actually are inactivated in the later part in the tissue development. That is why the gonads of these living organisms are sterile. They are infertile because when they were still developed during the embryonic stage, there's already the disorder there. And also, they found out that it's not actually all genes in the X chromosomes are inactivated. While While one X chromosome becomes a bar body, it's inactive, not all. So some portions of the bar bodies are active and are still translated. And that this results into excess genetic products in the X, which will then result into a phenotypic disorder. Okay? And we have Leon hypothesis to explain uh, the mechanism for the inactivation is explained by the Leon hypothesis or the Lion hypothesis. So Lion hypothesis tells us that the inactivation of the X chromosome actually is random. Like for example, in females, since you have two X chromosomes, which X chromosome is inactivated? Is it the X chromosome from the egg cell or the X chromosome contributed by the sperm cell? So Leon hypothesized that the inactivation actually is random. And based on their research on mice, they saw that in X-linked coat color genes, they saw that the heterozygote female mice show actually mottling coat color, meaning sagol-sagol, or they have patches of color instead of just showing one color. Like in cats, for example, the calico cats show black and yellow orange patches of fur color because they're heterozygotes of a black and an orange cat. So instead of one, uh, instead of knowing which X does it coming from, does that come from a male sperm X or a female egg X? But it's actually random. So here is an example of a calico cat. Okay. Uh, So there are evidences to support the Lion hypothesis. So one is the human G6PD or the glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, which is controlled by an X-linked gene. And studies show that the gene expression in clones of the human fibroblast shells show X inactivation in clone cells. And here, this demonstrate that it's actually random. It's not determined by uh, whether it's coming from an X or a Y. And here, what is activated is the both the DNA and the histone protein. So when we say histone, these are proteins where the DNA is wound to form your chromatin. So both the DNA is inactivated, and that silences most genes, and it creates a memory that keeps the same homolog inactivated following chromosome replication and cell division. And this results in what we call as imprinting, where the process of expression of genes of one homolog but not the other is affected. That's why in two X chromosomes, one is will inactivate, but in it creates a memory where the other X chromosome is not affected. The other X chromosome is still translated. Okay. The mechanism of inactivation, they found out SIC, no, the X inactivation center. It is actually found in the proximal end of the P arm in humans. In the P arm of the X chromosome, it actually controls the X chromosome. The genetic expression occurs only in activated X chromosome, and it consists of X inactive specific transcript or the CIST gene, which is very critical to the inactivation of the X chromosome. Okay, that ends our lecture. If you have questions, you just have to comment it in this post. Okay, thank you and good morning.